Good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to Office Hours. I'm Kamara Toffolo. For those of you joining for the first time, I am a resume writer, LinkedIn consultant, and job search strategist who helps established professionals dare to do work differently and land great fitting gigs. So we have a great guest lined up. We have Jamie Couper joining us. I'm really excited. Jamie and I have hung out quite a bit together on Twitter. I seem to meet all of my best friends on Twitter, I'd say. So Jamie is a recruiter for technology, engineering, and management roles. And he works with companies small and large, specializing in tech startups, enterprise software, and healthcare and utility contract jobs. So kind of the full spectrum of tech jobs, really, tech and engineering jobs. So we're going to be tackling a lot of different topics tonight, from new grads to newcomers to Canada, permanent roles to contract roles, lots of different stuff that we're going to talk about, lots of different insights and advice that Jamie will be sharing with you. I'm really excited. So please welcome Jamie to the show. Hello, Jamie. How are you?
Hello. I am great. Thank you so much for having me. How
It's
are
so
you?
great to have you. I am doing really well, thank you. And I'm so excited for our chat.
Yeah.
Super,
Awesome.
super pumped. Yeah. So I just want to check in with our audience because Office Hours boasts a bit of a global audience, I would say. So I would really love to know where everybody is tuning in from. So make sure to get your comments in the comments, your questions and location in the comments on the YouTube stream and in the comments or chat on LinkedIn as well. So let us know where you're tuning in from. We've got Michael from Calgary saying hello. So hello, Michael. Thank you for joining us. And we'll find out where everybody else is coming in from shortly. So, Jamie, let's tackle. We have a lot of stuff to cover tonight. So, let's start with resumes because that's kind of how we've connected. I would say we chat about resumes a lot. So, what would you say you as a recruiter are looking for in resumes for like super technical folks?
Yeah. So when it comes to resumes, the specific thing that I'm looking for and the specific thing that people sometimes they forget about this is a resume is a sales document.
Mm.
The express purpose of a resume is you deliver it to a company or a hiring manager. They read it. They want to interview you for a job they have or a job that maybe they don't have yet.
Mm.
So the most important thing in creating such a document is making sure that it has clarity.
Mhm.
So I get resumes through any number of means, and sometimes a resume is what I'm going to be reviewing at a first point of contact, and that means if I receive a resume directly from someone, either they email it to me or I get it in referral. But the majority of the time when I'm reaching out to people that I haven't necessarily spoken to before, and I'm doing this probably about 60% over LinkedIn and 40% over email, depending on the individual and where their experience lies. So lots of times a resume is something that's secondary,
Mm.
and I'm already speaking with them. And after I receive a resume, usually what the things that I will want to do with a resume is just strike the contact information, add my logo, and then move it along.
Okay.
What is really great to see on a resume, more detail is almost always better than less.
Mm.
And it depends on your designation to some extent.
Okay.
If you're a very technical software engineer, embedded engineer, electrical engineer, a lot of hiring managers and recruiters like myself are going to be looking for experience with specific tools or experience in specific domains.
Okay.
If we can, is it okay if we take a quick aside? We're going to take a quick aside.
Yeah.
So how I got into the recruitment industry was because of some domain experience I had. I went and got a bachelor's degree in history, went and taught English overseas, and then landed in Vancouver. And I was like, okay, I'm going to get a job in ESL. That was my mission. And there's lots of language schools in Vancouver, and all of them required that you take a bunch of extra courses. And I was like, I was teaching a week ago or a month ago. Like, let's make this happen. But I kept banging on doors and going around, and eventually I found a recruitment agency that specialized in ESL teachers.
Interesting.
Now, I didn't have recruitment experience, but I had some ESL experience, and I had just come back from teaching in South Korea. And so they were like, okay, we'll give you a shot. So it's something that often goes left out. Because earlier on in my recruitment career, when I was recruiting for large telecom and large consulting companies in Canada, it's all about Control F. You look at a resume, you hit Control F, you look for those specific tools.
Got it.
That's how I was taught. That's how the person that taught me was taught. And the person that taught them, same thing. At the same time, lots and lots of technical detail. Amazing. Fantastic. What you don't want to leave out, though, is the why. Why were all these tools being used? How did you use them? And what was the problem that you were solving for the customer?
Got it. So context is really key here, is what I'm hearing.
It's secondary, in my opinion.
Oh, okay.
And it's not standardized across. Like, everyone's got a different opinion when it comes to resumes, interviews, all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
Most important is like the hard facts.
Okay.
And then after that, context goes a long way. And if you can talk about a big problem you solved or a small problem you solved that had a big impact, that can make a difference. Because in a given company, if it's 100 people and it's a tech company, so 48 of them are engineers, you want to make sure that if you're one of those 48 engineers and you're looking to move to a competitor, or you're moving to a different company, you want to present yourself as best you can. And you're not necessarily competing with the people who you're working with, but show the problems that you solved and how you're exemplary amongst the group you're already in.
Okay.
And at the same time, like, you don't always need to be exemplary. Something that, and you may have experienced reviewing resumes as well. Some people have a tendency to overstate their qualifications, and some people have a way they kind of understate their qualifications. And there's a wonderful happy medium right in the middle, where we just lay it out. This is what happened. This is what I did. This is the impact I had. Maybe you've got a career gap at some point. If everything else is super detailed, you don't got to go in depth explaining that career gap.
Okay, that's good to know.
Should
you though?
You can. It depends on it depends on a number of different factors. Because like most people have career gaps. Hiring managers that are poorly reflecting on individuals that have a career gap in 2020, someone hurt them, and hurt people. And that's so how it goes. But if you were traveling, I was traveling. That's a cool story. And there's lots of hiring managers that have gone through the same experiences, good, bad, or ugly, that people go through earlier on in their careers or later on in their careers.
Good to know.
And if you have, like, I don't know that, like, justifying why you had a career gap. Sometimes you need to do it. Sometimes you don't. It's like, in my experience, And I've been laid off from jobs. I've been fired from jobs. I've switched jobs. I've had times when I've been between jobs. And it's something that most people go through.
Definitely.
And it's rare, like when you don't have any gaps at all in your experience, it's rarely questioned. But at the same time, like if you are doing what you're doing, unless it's your decision to switch jobs every time, and if that's your experience, fantastic. It's not, I don't know if it's the norm, but it's not something that I think we need to expect of people, especially in technology, because it's so dynamic and it's so changing.
Right. And if you're in demand, meaning you might be poached, you might be, you might have a contract that wraps up and then on to the next thing. So I totally get what you're saying. So
yeah.
Awesome.
Context also matters, because if and when you get that interview, telling a story with context is so memorable. And if you can reference something from your resume, because what happens with that resume and the reason why you want all that detail and all that context, someone's going to take your resume to a second person or third person. If it's a really small company and there's one person making decisions, okay, it's just that one person you have to convince. Even if it's a early stage startup, sometimes there's several people that will look at your resume, and that's what, they'll either share your LinkedIn profile or your resume when they're discussing you. And someone can flip a resume to their colleague, and that colleague could be in HR, they could be in finance, it could be an executive. And if they can attach a story on top of your resume, and that story is reflected in the resume, it's more memorable. Those hard facts are the most important, because oftentimes it's A or B. And unless we're talking about quantum computers, it's ultimately binary. Quantum computers are coming soon, though, and then it's not gonna. But with that's
so like for me.
Yeah, but context it does make a big deal. Yeah.
That's good to know. So, so really, as you're saying, the details, that how you created solutions, and then the context to link it to something that would resonate in an interview, especially to make it more memorable, is what it sounds like is super important from your perspective. So, just wanted to pop back into the chat. We've got Stephen from Glasgow, Scotland. We've got Rajesh from North Carolina. Another user from Cary, North Carolina, and Zahib. And Rajesh actually has a question for us. So I feel that I have technical capabilities but lack domain knowledge. How do I convince recruiters to take a risk on me? What would you say?
This is a great question. And I'm really glad that Rajesh asked this. And I have a specific example. I can't recall their name, so I won't mention it. But there was someone that had this exact same predicament a little over a year ago. And recruiters taking a risk, yes, convincing recruiters to take a risk on you. Recruiters aren't the best person to try and convince if you don't have the experience. Recruiters do not have as much power as people assume they have. Like, I'm hired by companies to help recruit for their positions. And I have the ability to influence. I have the ability to create attention and urgency. Ultimately, all of the decisions as to whether or not someone is hired rest with my clients and not with me. And it can be challenging to go through an agency recruiter when you don't have that experience, just because it's a higher level of competition. It might be more effective because ultimately that company, they're the one that's doing the hiring. Finding someone at a company you want to work at, when you don't have that domain knowledge, and speaking to them directly and figuring out what they want, it can be really, really effective.
So cutting out the middleman?
If you, like what I can do for job seekers, save them time and energy and help them best present themselves. And although we work in different facets with sometimes the same people, but sometimes very different people, I think that's what career coaches to a great extent do. But, and here's the real, because there's tons and tons of health data analytics out there, and it's really difficult for all those numbers to get crunched. If anyone from British Columbia is on and you have the good fortune to follow Justin McElroy on Twitter, he's breaking down some of those numbers every day at 3 p.m. And
oh, wow.
Sometimes he doesn't have the time to do it. So there's a lot of data out there. And if you can find a bunch of health data analytical information that's public and presented in a compelling way, people will notice. So there was an individual, I was around this time last year that I first met him, or her, or they, in the interest of me not remembering their name and maintaining their confidentiality. Recent graduate, great attitude. I remember speaking to them and being like, it really sucks that I can't help you. I wish I was in a different position. I didn't give them the advice, but I started giving this advice to everyone. So what they did is they went and they took a bunch of health data from Statistics Canada. They built an application, and that application revealed a bunch of when COVID breakouts happened that were announced by the Canadian government. They got a lot of hits on the website. People took notice. It didn't necessarily take off, but they took the technical capabilities that they had and they found a way to showcase that material online. And then they used that when they were looking for interviews and looking for opportunities to get involved with different companies. And it was a really effective tool. So if you've got your Bachelor of Engineering, if you just did a coding camp, if you're coming out of one of the great technical colleges like Mohawk or BCIT or Algonquin or any number of others across Canada, even the technology industry has a high barrier to entry. It's not as high as other industries. It's like you can't be a doctor without a medical degree. It's difficult to be a lawyer without a law degree, except for that one guy on that one TV show. Suits? Yeah, with Meghan Markle was on it.
Oh, Suits, yeah.
There could be more than one. There could be more than one. But if you know enough to build a web application, you can build a web application, and then you can use that, and it's demonstrable. People can look at it. And I've heard this from people in a number of different areas of the tech industry. I was at an OWASP meetup a few months ago, and a lot of the team was saying, if you don't have the domain experience, try and get involved in an open source project. And open source projects, like some of them don't, like some of them they require an enormous amount of coordination because it's someone's side project that they're doing for fun. But there's some way to get involved, some way to help out. And if you can showcase that you actually worked on these projects and did some coding and did some coordination or some presentation or whatever it is, that stuff, it's not often viewed equal to professional work experience that is paid. But someone can go look it up and say, yes, he, she, or they've done this web app, they participate in this open source project. These are some tough challenges that not everyone can do. Awesome. I want to meet with them. Yeah.
I love that you're bringing that up because when I'm talking to new grads about resume writing, I'm always recommend their number one concern is, how do I write my resume if I have zero experience, right? And so projects are really the best way, as you've identified as well. Projects, self-directed, or as you're also mentioning, open source, the best way to get some hands-on experience even if it's not paid, right? So I'm so glad you're bringing that up. What about for newcomers? Do you think that's also a good strategy for folks who are fighting against the, I don't have any local, regional, domestic experience, or what are your thoughts around that?
That's a great question. And it's an interesting challenge. But at the same time, it's also something that there's a lot of misinformation out there, which people need to be fairly wary of.
Okay.
There are many people that move to Canada from other countries, and it is both the notion that you need Canadian local experience in order to get a job working in Canada. It's both true and untrue, because a lot of people, when they're applying to positions, that's kind of the feedback they're going to get, which is, it's not inaccurate, but at the same time, it's not helpful. But many people, like in Toronto, I think it's like 57% of people were not born in Canada who live and work there. So there's many other individuals that immigrate to Canada and have been through the exact same experience as a newcomer or a new Canadian would go through. And they can be a really effective, there's lots of people, and it doesn't necessarily need to be someone from a community that you're familiar with, but there's many people who move from different countries to Canada. It can be tough to find work at first, and there's all kinds of different reasons why. And part of it's language. If you come from another country where business is done in English or in French, you've got a leg up.
Right.
French is not, like, outside of Quebec, Ottawa, Kingston, and a few other places, it's not necessarily going to be as helpful as others. But that can make a difference. And at the same time, there's lots of opportunity to get involved in open source projects, and it's something that and there's also opportunity as an entrepreneur. Now, I don't know about other provinces, but like the government of British Columbia, they've put together something to improve online stores. So small businesses can get a $7,500 grant to improve online stores.
Oh, okay.
And which is great for small businesses. I don't know that there are enough web design and web companies in Vancouver, or British Columbia as a whole, to help out all of these potential businesses that are going to get this funding.
Yeah, no kidding.
And it's like, I spoke with a couple individuals that just this week that had web design companies in the countries they were born in, and then they came here and they've been having trouble translating that experience. And I have it, and one of those individuals, like, they come from a WordPress PHP background, which is not something that I spend a lot of time working in, but I made them aware of this program, and I was like, this is great. And same again, like, a lot of people that are new Canadians, if you find opportunities like this where there's government funding for something, you can go to other people possibly within the community you come from and say, like, hey, there's this grant available. I want to help you out with your business. This can be a win-win-win. And it'll take a lot of hustle and a lot of legwork, which is what a lot of job seeking is if you're starting out or if you don't have the exact experience. But there's a lot of ways to get it done. And there's also a lot of programs in each province, in each major city, for newcomers, and you absolutely should avail yourselves of them if you're looking for something. That's
awesome.
Yeah,
that's such great. Like, I had never even thought of that. Like, that is so great that you have your thumb on the pulse of that, and like the different project opportunities that newcomers could, as you say, avail themselves. So that's fantastic. While we're on the topic of newcomers, I was actually just having a conversation with someone who is a not so recent newcomer, but found themselves having to take what they called a survival job. So they had to be employed to survive, obviously. And now they're like not sure how to position that on their resume. So what would you say would make the most sense for someone to explain a survival job that's outside their area of expertise and wanting to get back into their area of expertise?
This is a very good and a very difficult question. And I am going to answer it, and I know how to answer it.
Okay.
And there's two conflicting ideas. And one is that, no, you shouldn't list it.
Okay.
And the other is, yes, you should list it. And it depends a lot, or no, I don't know what it, no, let me strike that.
Okay.
I like the tough questions. Good.
I'm glad you're game for them.
Yeah. If you don't list it and it comes up, it's almost like you've been caught in a lie.
Ooh, okay.
And it's very difficult to backtrack that. Conversely, people hold all kinds of biases.
Yes.
And I don't, like, if you take a service job or a survival job, I don't think that reflects negatively on an individual in any way. Like, surviving and serving are both things. Like, everyone deserves to survive, and taking a service job, there's nothing wrong with that. There's throughout the past year, we have been, I might get a bit emotional on this just because there's so many people on the front lines that are doing so much.
I know.
And suggesting that those people are less than compared to others who are like very good at Excel or programming, all kinds of other things. It's a bit of a false comparison. And it's a really difficult question. I know on the opposite side, when I used to work I used to work in an office in the before time. And people would sometimes walk in, totally stoked to help new grads anytime. Sometimes I'd meet with new grads and they hadn't had part-time or service or labor jobs. They had just done school.
Right.
And there's a lot of skills you learn in service jobs, and there's nothing wrong with it. So what you gotta, and it can be challenging when you're looking at really big companies and applying to them, because it's difficult to guess who's the hiring manager is on the other side.
Right.
And if you go through someone's LinkedIn and you at a startup company and see what they did previously, if they've got some job listed on there that was a little bit that like was service or survival or anything in between, absolutely list that on your resume. Don't shy away from it. And you could put something in the resume like this first job in Canada to learn just like XYZ about Canada. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. Leaving it off the resume but then making someone aware of it in conversation, maybe that could be a nice little balance. It's difficult to say. I wouldn't recommend shying away from it. Like, if you've got a bachelor's degree from McGill in computer engineering, but you're working in a service job at the moment, it is what it is. Shying away from what one has done previously, it can go awry very quickly. Just leaving it out there and being like, I worked at this job and this is what I did. It can affect different people differently. But I say go for it. Just leave it out there. And people that don't respect hard work and hustle, they're the kind of hiring managers that are going to be more focused on where you went to school and where you worked previously.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. And it's something that you just it's something that you can't really avoid. But at the same time, there's just as many people out there that went through the exact same experience, and they'll think on it, they'll reflect on it. Yeah.
Awesome. I'm totally with you and totally agree. I'm all for including it. I believe that all jobs, no matter how different they might be, have a common and connecting thread. You just need to find what it is, and tell a story or narrative around why you took that job. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, using an explanation like this was my first role in Canada, or, I established myself with this role and I gained skills that, or I honed strengths that that could transfer into my next role in whatever. I'm glad you mentioned that. So that's fantastic. I just want to hop over to the chat, and just mention, if you have any questions for Jamie, please do put them in the chat on YouTube or the comments on LinkedIn. We will get to them. And of course, please give this video a like or a reaction on LinkedIn. Much appreciated. So let's talk about permanent versus contract roles. So yeah.
Great question.
What's like, when job seekers are thinking about pursuing one or the other, what, like, does it require a different approach? Like, what are your thoughts?
It varies widely from company to company. And there's lots of companies that it can be a lot easier to get into if you work on contract first. The company based in Vancouver that makes a lot of black stretchy yoga pants.
Not sure who they are.
Yeah. I used to work a lot on contract positions for them. And environments that move really, really quickly, like said company, or environments that may move a little bit less quickly, such as government, insurance, banking, where they can't afford mistakes. People are going to hire a lot of contractors, and a lot of companies that have robust unionized environments, they're going to hire contractors for the extra work. And in terms of how you craft a resume for either one, if you're looking for full-time employment, to some extent, and the employers that I like to work with and partner with and support are going to look at someone holistically. And when I say look at someone holistically, it's kind of a vague term, but what I mean is they're going to look at what someone has done previously and their expertise, their domain knowledge, their knowledge of various tools, and what they can contribute to in the future. So how they can grow with the company. And usually if you're writing a resume for a full-time permanent job, it's going to go through a human resources department at some point, even if it's just a rubber stamp at the end. And it doesn't necessarily need to be as detailed. And like we were talking about earlier, like context and storytelling, this is something that can be great to include. And for a contract position, ostensibly, one is a hired gun. You're in there to do an express task for an express amount of time.
Right.
That task can change over time, and that express amount of time, it can always be extended. It can always be increased, or it can come to an end sooner. But when a company's hiring contractors, or when the government is hiring contractors, it is something that it usually goes through procurement, and it's usually a capital expenditure. So it is both reviewed differently and looked at differently. And rarely, and like when it comes to like a full-time permanent position, the reason for like interviews and all this kind of thing is so that a company can find who they believe to be the best fit or the best person for a position. And it's a lot more rare that it comes into question why someone was hired, because it's usually not anyone's concern why why someone was hired into a company.
Mm-hmm.
If it's a government contract position that's paid for with tax dollars or a crown corporation, then at some point, potentially there could be some kind of review from either the government or federally or provincially the CRA. And because of that, if you're writing a resume for contract positions, the detail is most important. And context is still valuable, but it's less important. I have a colleague who is excellent at navigating the intricacies of government matrices when it comes to bidding on these kind of opportunities. And there's a lot out there. Some of them are only available through a preferred vendor, which is usually an agency, recruiting agency, a system integrator, or an engineering company. Some of them are completely open to anyone. More detail, and some people have both. Some people will have two versions of the resume. They'll have a version for employment and a version for consulting. A lot of individuals that I've met over the years in the technology industry, they don't necessarily care how they get paid. They want to be paid well. But getting paid as a contractor, getting paid as an employee, it's not necessarily something that is a huge concern to candidates. And conversely, there's some people who are only interested in being an independent consultant, and some people who are only interested in being an employee. I know that BC has a really high number of people that are self-employed, and that's gig workers, independent contractors, and entrepreneurs. And it can be lucrative and it can be effective. And a weird thing that some people aren't mindful of, if you go and do a bunch of contracts, it can be difficult to go back to being an employee in an employer's mind. And it's simpler for someone that has experience working as a full-time employee to move into contracting. Contracting is just more lucrative, and again, that hired gun mentality. Even if it's not, even if the person doesn't have that mentality and the company doesn't have that mentality, because there's many companies, the Black Stretchy Yoga Pants company being one of them, where there isn't a strong delineation between contract workers and employees. Managers, directors, and VPs, they would like to get the job done as best as possible with people being as happy as they can. And in some companies, contractors are part of the culture. In some companies that recently purchased Discord and build the operating system that this computer runs on, and it's not a Mac, sometimes it's really close, but there's just like little breaks. Something that gets broken down a lot when people are either for or against contracting, that's kind of gone in the past year, is those pizza lunches. So some places, not everyone gets pizza. Only the employees get pizza.
Actually, I saw that in my last corporate job. There was a very distinct difference between who got the lunches and who didn't, and the contractors didn't.
Yeah.
That always felt very, I didn't really like it myself. But in any case, I like that you brought up that if you have a steady stream, let's say, of contract work, or if you've been a consultant, that going towards like an employment position, like a job can be a bit challenging. I've seen it myself with my own clients who go from consulting to a job. So how would you recommend someone kind of reposition that work so that they would be more attractive as an employee after a history of contracting?
Yeah, it's challenging. And right now there's tons of options in the tech industry. And while a lot of people are struggling, and I'm cognizant of that, the tech industry is doing very, very well. There's lots of IPOs, there's lots of mergers, there's lots of venture capital for startups, and lots of startups getting acquired. Sometimes it's regional. Ottawa, Toronto, Calgary, a lot of contract work. A lot of companies hiring contractors.
Right.
A lot of people in hiring positions in those companies sometimes think I have to hire a contractor for this. They don't. There's usually, and especially right now as things are more remote and dispersed and engaged, companies have a bit more options in who they bring on, and workers have more options as well. And it's something that, like, if you're totally finished with the contract world and you want to go back to being an employee, amazing. You can just write that down. Contracting was sweet. I don't know that you want to write exactly that.
Contracting was sweet.
Contracting was sweet, but it's over. And at the same time, it's something that both recruiters and hiring managers will sometimes kind of be wary of. Like, do you want a full-time job because you don't have a contract? Do you want something until your next contract? That's kind of the worst fear in the minds of a manager or director that's hiring, is that someone's going to take this job as a contractor or as an employee and then leave when they find their next contract. Concurrently, though, yes, that manager would be inconvenienced when they left, but at the same time, they're going to get a contractor for a few months. And I don't want to be the recruiter that got them that job and charged a fee for someone that left after,
Right.
I don't want to be that recruiter. I don't even want my competitor to be that per se. But things change, and opportunities and everything changes, and it's doable. And it can really help if you're making any kind of transition from one industry to another, one domain to another, from contract to full-time. In that instance, your best asset is a referral.
Okay.
If one of my clients has a requirement for a full-time permanent hire, and I send them someone that's been contracting for 10, 15 years, what I don't want, what the oftentimes that hiring manager will think is just like, okay, Jamie's looking for a quick fee. He's trying to, put someone into a position that's not necessarily a good fit. It's something that I don't love trying to push through it, because it's more work for me. But if for whatever reason, like, someone really wants that, and the reason why people switch from employment to independent contracting, it could be like, the pizza party again. If I'm not getting pizza, but the independent contractors are making twice what I'm making,
pizza.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to buy my own pizza.
Yeah, I'm going to buy my own pizza parlor. Yeah.
But then again, things change. Maybe, you take up a mortgage, you start a family. And if you make a lot of money as a contractor, or even just more than enough money to get by, sweet, great. And it differs from, it sometimes makes a lot of sense. Like in business analytics and project management, contractors tend to make a lot more money, because often those two skill sets are attached to a project.
Right.
And then it just makes sense from a planning perspective. Like, I've got this project, I'm going to hire a project manager, and they're going to work forever on this project. And then once the project's over and the budget's gone, we're all complete.
Part ways. Yep. So speaking of managers, maybe not project managers, but the folks who are leading people, how should they be approaching their job search as they're getting more senior? What would you ideally like to see out of them in terms of their resume, LinkedIn, or how they interview?
Yes. So I do less work with managers. Managers kind of like the level where I stop working.
Okay.
And I've got some fantastic colleagues at Team of Solutions Group that excel at recruiting executives, recruiting directors, recruiting vice presidents. And I'm happy to work in concert with them. And for people that are moving from being an individual contributor to a lead, or from a lead to a manager, it becomes twofold. And when I think back on managers that I've had, I've been very fortunate to have wonderful managers and mentors throughout much of my recent career. I had plenty of jerks when I was younger, so it's all kind of evening out.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's fine. So as a manager in a technical field like engineering, or e-commerce, or anything related to fintech or finance or banking, it's twofold. Because as a manager, you both want to get the most out of your team, and you also want to get the job done. And it depends a lot on the organization and all kinds of different things. That one company that we're not going to talk about, headquartered in Seattle, that has a pretty expansive e-commerce marketplace. Some people have said that working there, that managers, a lot of them are about getting the job done. The experience I've had with people that work at that company, a lot of them say it's all about the team. Some managers are great, some managers aren't. And as we're moving forward, and a lot of companies are very conscious of the pandemic, like there's a lot more burnout happening, and burnout is something that happens even before the current state of the world.
Right.
So what I'm looking for if I'm recruiting for a management position is both that confidence and that leadership. And at the same time, they need to be good at what they do, or what they did before. So if you are going to be if you're going to be managing a group of really high performing C++ engineers that are building a really complex data project, you don't need to be as good at coding and designing software as your team.
Okay.
You need to be able to identify, manage, and help those people do the best they can.
Right.
And you need their respect. And it's not something that you can glean from a resume. And it's not something I'm an expert at gleaning. But at the same time, sometimes hiring someone that is really good at what they do, that's the best thing. At Tima, the partners and to become a partner at Tima, you need to be very good at recruitment. And that's kind of this, like at some point, that decision was made by people far above me. But there's all kinds. There's both. Because there's some people that are really good at managing and really getting the most out of people, and there's tons of jobs for them. It's something, I don't know if company culture is the right word, but it's something that's going to vary from company to company. At Tima, if you're going to want to move into a partner role, into an executive director role, you need to be really good at sales and recruitment. Full stop. We have competitors where we've got excellent managers that they weren't necessarily the highest billers. They do create really effective workplaces where everyone feels supported and does their best. And I think there's room for both. Personally, and I don't have I work in, like everyone at Team works fairly independently, and we don't have managers per se. when I have had managers in the past, and when I am interviewing managers, I'm trying to figure out if they micromanage, and because micromanaging usually comes from a place of fear, and fearing that your employees or your underlings will surpass you, it's a real thing. I've been afraid that people would surpass me, and oftentimes when that fear exists, they do. And but like, there's a place for everyone. And in the resume, as a manager, you want to talk about your success, and then you want to talk about your team's success.
Good point.
And because both are important. Because being the individual that, like, yes, he, she, or they hit their metrics. Yes, he, she, or they got the job done. Did you foster an inclusive environment? Was there great retention? Was there all of these things? Because it's going to, like, if you don't have both, I think we're moving towards a place. There's still a lot of work to be done by a lot of people. But in the future, I think you're going to need both.
Right.
And as we move into a future with more technology and more technology jobs, the competition is going to be super high. And there's going to be needs for both.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, from my experience in terms of working with, like, I work largely with mid to senior leaders, I would say that when they have the balance of technical expertise, regardless of the industry, regardless of the discipline, technical expertise with being a great people manager, like being able to really mobilize and harmonize teams, that's when the magic really happens, and that's who really stands out on a resume. And
it can be difficult as a non-technical person, which I am. And like, a lot of it's kind of just relative.
Right.
Is this person, do they sound like other people that hire managers? Do they sound like them?
Do they sound like them? Like, that would be a positive or negative?
Positive, yeah.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, because like, if like a bunch of competitive companies, there's going to be people that are very, very well regarded. And I'll often ask candidates, like, cool, what was your manager like? Were they good to work for? I might not call their manager for 6-12 months, and I often forget. I do all my notes on paper, and that's fine.
Nice. Old school.
People who take all their notes by typing, I respect them so much.
Oh, that's how I do it. I can't write anymore. My penmanship is garbage. But anyway.
My penmanship is still not great, but yeah. Okay.
And Michael was just saying, good conversation. I'm really enjoying it. And he says that Michael must be a recruiter. I find that talking to folks helps with the do they fit factor. So that's great. Awesome. So let's talk about, like, where you hang out as a recruiter. So we met on Twitter. When we chatted first, we were talking about Twitter, but also the other places that you hang out to find top talent. So where are you going that isn't LinkedIn to find the best and the brightest?
Yeah. So I use a couple tools I use one tool that kind of scans the whole web. And the only reason I use it is because it lets me look up people on GitHub. And it was interesting. I've seen a couple iterations of this tool from different companies, and I use the one I'm using is Human Predictions. They're a great little startup out of Chicago, really nice people. And a bunch of the people that built the product came from a recruitment background, which is great. I get no shortage of pitches from people that have never recruited anyone that are building a recruitment tool that doesn't, like, it's not really needed, and that's okay. But showcasing yourself online in an individual website or a GitHub, it can give people an idea of what your interests are. Because ultimately, it's something that you can't really predict because I'm searching based on tools and domain experience. But what I'm really looking for are people that are excellent at what they do, but frustrated or no longer enamored with their current employment situation, and either want to change their employment or don't realize they want to change their employment. And then I don't want to create a need that isn't there. But some of those people find out like, yeah, there's a ton of opportunity out there and I haven't been taking advantage of it. And I'd love to do that. Everything online, like all your socials, Twitter is, I go on Twitter a lot and it's really effective for a lot of things. And it's also a little bit fun. Everyone on LinkedIn, it's professional. And so people, they're kind of hesitant. You get upset and you need to express it, do it on Twitter.
Yeah.
Don't do it on LinkedIn. Screenshots can happen anywhere.
Sure.
But if you're venting on your personal Twitter, that's a venial sin. If you, as a representative of your company, are posting all over the place on LinkedIn, maybe take a breather. That's okay. Personal websites are also super good. And most of the time, when someone applies to a job or sends me an email or does this, I'm either going to Google their name or I'm going to search them on LinkedIn. And oftentimes Googling their name or using another search engine like DuckDuckGo or whatever it is you like, it'll take me to their LinkedIn. And especially if they have like a very common name, it'll just, the powers that be and the algorithms that are will take me to them. And everything's out there. If you're publicly putting stuff on social media next to your name, an employer can potentially look at it and form an opinion about you based on that.
That's important to know.
And it's usually not one-on-one. Like you can say whatever you want, do whatever you want. But it's like if you're out there putting people down, that's a red flag. If you're spending an enormous amount of time arguing on social media, that and like there's frequent posts that are just like negative, that's not always what a hiring manager wants representing their brand.
For sure.
Makes sense. But at the same time, like social media is also really powerful for job seeking. Like you and I, we met on social media.
Yeah.
We're having some fun right now. We're talking.
Sure. Yeah.
We're supporting each other. And that's great.
Yeah.
And we're almost out of time.
We are almost out of time, but Michael just got in with a question, right almost at the top of the hour, which I don't want to miss. So what does experience mean? Is there a time when it expires? This is such a meaty question. This could go so many ways. So what do you think?
Moore's law is not a law, but the computational power of processors tends to double every 1.5 to 3 years. And when does experience expire? What I generally tell people is the last 10 years are very valid. And Thomas Friedman of the New York Times, he wrote a book called Thanks for Being Late. And with that book, he said that a lot of things happened in 2007. So what I tell to people that I'm working with, if I'm helping them craft their resume or if I'm helping them apply to a position, 10 years or 2007, this is how back experience needs to go. It's not that it expires, but it becomes less relevant. And again, I'm speaking specifically about positions that are individual contributor to manager and not above.
Right.
I would imagine it's very similar for executives, even at the top, like the highest levels. The past 10 years are extremely more relevant. It never expires, and like there's always problems to be solved. What a delineation that I do often expect people to make in their resumes is professional experience, personal project.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
If somebody paid you to do something, that is
Mhm.
professional experience.
Mm-hmm.
If you were not paid to do something, that is not professional experience.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that it's not valid. And there's tons of software and tons of companies that started out as a personal project.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Does it apply to leadership? Michael is asking next.
Right.
Very good question. Very good question. I don't know the answer to that.
Mm.
If you haven't led a team in 10 years, can you lead a team again? Yeah, absolutely you can.
Right.
When it comes to job seeking, though, it's a question of competition.
Mm-hmm.
If you in your heart, you know that you need to be a leader and you're meant to lead, awesome. Go forward. Go for it. Do that. It's going to be tougher if you haven't done something in 10 years to do that again in your next job.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing's impossible. And it's just a question of competition. If there's someone that led a bigger team more recently and they're looking for someone to lead a big team, yeah, that'll be a challenge.
For sure.
And John Paul Shaughnessy
Yeah.
coming in after the buzzer.
Yeah. Do you have time?
I always got time for John
Okay.
Paul.
Yeah, would love your take on this.
What I see now is there's a lot of expansion in security. There are not enough cybersecurity professionals in Canada or the United States for all the jobs. There are a lot of breaches happening, and the breaches are very, very expensive. Cryptocurrency, I don't really understand. I understand the value. And a lot of people think that we're eventually going to move to one digital currency across the world. It's more a question of when than if. There's a lot of problems that are getting solved with blockchain. And there's a lot of blockchain solutions that don't solve a problem. I think that area is going to expand a lot. The same again. And I think when it comes to climate change, there's going to be a lot of innovation. And it's kind of the area where there's the most necessity and the most and it's most ripe for innovation. Because if it doesn't happen, we're in big trouble. And when you look at Tesla's valuation, I made a euphemism for every company except that one.
Right. How come they get to be named?
Yeah. I mean, people like it and it's super effective, but like in the future, pretty sure people are going to drive electric cars, or those cars will be driven by AI. And power is going to come in the form of solar panels, and there's going to be a lot of innovation there. And healthcare and mental health care, that's going to be a big thing as well. And there's a lot of innovation happening there. Yeah, it'll be an exciting time. So those would be my main three picks. And there's a lot of technology that's going to happen around blockchain. And there's going to be a lot of technology developed to combat climate change. And both of those the question is more about buy-in. And companies investing in it and companies and purchasing those kind of products. I think we're going to see more of that.
Yeah. That's awesome. Great predictions. And that aligns well with like the clients that I'm seeing coming to me. And John Paul says, thanks. Great stuff, guys. Thanks for the question, John Paul. So Jamie, let's wrap up. But before we do, I want to check in on what you're currently recruiting for. Any open roles right now that are?
Oh, that's a great question. Thank you so much. It's a really interesting time. And as I may have mentioned previously, like I started out recruiting contractors for enterprise companies. And I still do that. partially because of just, I met like a lot of really great independent consultants early in my career that are still doing independent consulting. So there's and April 1st in Canada is year end for the government.
Right.
So it's a brand new year next week. And we've got some great opportunities in BC healthcare and BC healthcare IT. For project managers. There's a lot of innovation happening in the mining industry. I've got a mining company that is looking for some cybersecurity project managers to kind of secure some IoT developments that are happening. I've got a fantastic little application security consultancy. Super smart people, super great to get along with. They're going to be looking for an associate later in April.
Nice.
We've got a company that is breaking barriers and looking to bring IPTV forward. And they're looking for some embedded engineers, some C++ engineers, and hopefully some leadership as well. And the stuff I'm working on, like it changes as priorities change and job descriptions change and everything changes, but that's kind of like a high level overview.
Are those all BC based? Or are some of them like open to remote? What's location details for those?
Great question. Those are all BC based.
Okay.
Most of the positions I work on are based in BC,
okay,
Toronto, or California.
Okay.
Much of them can be worked remotely.
Okay.
What I'm seeing, there's tons of examples that disprove this. I'm seeing if you're in the same province or territory or same time zone, so north-south remote, not a problem right now.
Okay.
Sweet. You live in Fort St. John, you live in Whitehorse, you live in Dawson City, you live in Inuvik, great, no worries. Yep. You can work a job in Vancouver. It's logistically challenging, and to some extent, it can be, there can be a bunch of challenges when you work across time zones.
Okay.
Lots of teams do it. And some companies are hiring across time zones and they're making it work. And they usually do that for core hours where there's 10 to 4. This is the time that everyone can get together and does their meetings. And then you do work before and you do work afterwards.
Right.
So it's something that a lot of companies have taken advantage of the ability to hire remote workers and done very, very well. Because if you can hire anywhere, then you're not limited by geographic stipulations.
Right.
The work that I have the privilege to do amongst companies that are producing hardware, it's different. You can't build hardware remotely. You need to turn the screw, solder the iron needs to happen. With software, you can work across Canada. It's just a little bit more difficult.
Got it.
Tima, the wonderful agency I'm a part of, has traditionally been remote first and geographically dispersed. And there's people in the southern United States that are working on stuff in BC, and there's people in Toronto that are working on stuff in California, and every other iteration you can imagine. And people at Tima, sometimes they're able to make it work. Usually, and personally, I try to focus on the West Coast. And I do work with a lot of really great client managers that have business in Toronto that I'm very, very happy to support. And I grew up in Ontario, and it's nice to get back in touch with people from back east. And that's what I'm working on in a nutshell. And it was very pleasant. Thank you for having me on the show.
Well, thank you for being here. And for anyone who is watching who might be qualified for one of those, say, cybersecurity roles, how can they best reach out to you?
Email is always the hot ticket, and my email is listed on my LinkedIn. I will get back to you right away. I've seen LinkedIn stories as a thing now, and people that have the LinkedIn app on their phone, great, power to you. I can't do it. I'll see someone post something and I'll be like, I have to argue with this person. And then I'm in the grocery line and I'm texting and typing and there's a line behind. So I just, I do the LinkedIn and the business socials on the business laptop. email's always there, and I'll get back to someone. And even if I'm not in the office, it'll usually let you know when I'm back. So email is always the best option. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I don't love a cold call. No, sorry, I said that wrong. I love a cold call.
You love a cold call. Okay.
Love it. I've been getting a lot of cold calls lately from people that won't tell me what they want, and I don't get it, but hey, that's okay. If you do cold call me, just tell me what you want.
Yeah.
If you've got a wicked product to sell me, tell me what it is.
Yeah. Cut to the chase.
If you're looking for like a new job, and if you're looking to drastically switch careers and provinces and this kind of thing, I might not be your best option.
Right.
I'm happy to point you towards the best option, in my opinion, and help someone how I can. But yeah, email always best. LinkedIn totally fine.
Awesome. And I have linked to Jamie's LinkedIn in the YouTube description video, or the video description, and also tagged him in the LinkedIn live post. So you can go straight there and send him an email with exactly what you're looking for. Don't hem and haw. Exactly what you're looking for. Anyway, Jamie, really appreciate you taking the time. Thank you for staying overtime. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. This was a great conversation. I learned a lot. I'm sure you learned a lot. And thank you so much, Jamie.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.